I was.
No. I have P.
What? Oh yeah. Okay, good one.
So I was looking at stress in fish, right, when they're drunk. So there's this thing called the HPA axis, which is, you guys know about pathways, right?
Basically.
Kind of.
Basically, okay. So there's something called the hypothalamus, which is the H, which is part of the brain. There's something called the pituitary, which is the P. It's actually anterior pituitary, but that's not important. And then there's something called the adrenal gland. I think that's what it's called, which is the A. So what this does is when you're stressed. So if something stresses you out,
You should probably jot this down, guys.
if something stresses you out, it sets this whole pathway in motion. It causes the hypothalamus to produce CRF, and then the production of CRF causes the pituitary to produce ACTH, and the production of ACTH causes the adrenal gland to produce cortisol. And that's what we were focusing on. We were measuring cortisol levels in fish. So cortisol is a hormone. It's a stress hormone. So when it's produced, if you're stressed out, you'll produce cortisol, and cortisol helps to manage stress, kind of regulate the stress in your body so you become less stressed and you don't flip out as much. Because, I mean, think about it, you get stressed, and if you didn't have cortisol to help manage that, it would get bad quickly.
Then why are you still
I think you might need to go from stress again because everybody was getting other stuff.
So you get stressed out, causes the hypothalamus, which is in your brain somewhere, causes the hypothalamus to produce CRF. CRF binds with the pituitary, and the pituitary then produces ACTH. When ACTH is produced, binds with the adrenal, or goes to the adrenal, and then the adrenal produces cortisol. So cortisol is what we're looking at. It's a hormone, and it helps to manage stress. That might be spelled wrong. So what we wanted to do is, because with alcohol use, this pathway is upregulated, right? So that means that when you're stressed, you'll end up producing more cortisol.
Each of those arrows are neurons, guys.
Aren't the circles?
Well, really, the circle combination arrow. But it's a neuron.
Not the bottom, because the adrenal isn't in the brain.
Okay. The H to the P is one neuron. And then the P is hormone. Yeah, okay.
So anyway, this cortisol, we know that this pathway, based on like previous studies and stuff, is upregulated when you drink alcohol. This isn't an alcohol addiction, this is just in regular alcohol use. So what we were actually looking at is dosage. So if you drink more alcohol, will you be even less stressed? And when we looked at the behavioral side of things, because I don't know is anyone at the exhibit? Did anyone come in the rooms? So I explained the behavioral graph, how when fish are stressed and anxious, they go to the bottom of the tank. And when they're less stressed, they'll be more at the top of the tank. So we looked at 3 groups, 0% alcohol, 0.5% alcohol, and 1% alcohol. And we found that if you look at the top part, so the less stressed area, it looked something like this. All significant was 0, 0.5, and 1. So as the fish drank more, they were spending more time at the top of the tank, which means they were less stressed. So then we were like, okay, well, let's measure the cortisol levels too to see if that correlates. And so we did that, and you have the results in front of you. So everyone has their little sheet. So the thing is, the behavioral made sense with the previous knowledge we had of how this is upregulated. You'd expect more cortisol, less stress. Saw that in the behavior of the fish. So we looked at the cortisol, and you see on the left there's A, B, C, D, E, F, right? Those are our different fish. So in 0%, 0.5%, and 1%, there were 6 fish in each group, so 18 fish total. And we ended up, for this experiment, splitting it into head and body, because we had to homogenize and like squish the fish up, and the homogenizing tubes weren't big enough for the whole fish. So that's why it's 0% H, 0% B, 0.5% H, 0.5% B, 1% H, 1% B, right? Got that? Everyone get that there are actually only 18 fish?
Ask him a question.
What's the difference between 0% HA and 1% HA.
The amount of alcohol.
So then we did the mean and the count and the standard deviation and the standard error of, anyway. So what are these numbers under each of them, like in the grid? Ignore the mean, just look at the A, B, C, D, F, and across. So if you look at these numbers, that is the absorbance level. That is not the cortisol level. So we did something called, first we had to extract the cortisol from the fish by squishing them up and doing a bunch of stuff to them. And then once we had that cortisol, we had to do an ELISA assay. And that is, it's like a plate type thing, and you put the cortisol in, and there are antibodies at the bottom of the plate that bind to the cortisol, and it measures the quantity of cortisol through light or color. Because you add substances that change color based on the amount of cortisol in the plate.
Simplify.
Simplify. The plate measures the amount of cortisol, basically. In comparison, so there's something called the standard that you do. So if you look at the bottom left, kind of next to the graph, how it says cortisol and OD, those were pre-given samples with exact amounts of cortisol. So like 0, 0.012, 0.037, 0.111, 0.333. They're concentrations of cortisol. I think it's like nanograms per microliter. I might be making that up, so don't actually write that down. But so what this gives us, supposedly, is it's supposed to give us a standard curve. So you see, like, you have.
Why are you telling them what they're supposed to get?
What?
Why are you telling them what they're supposed to get?
Because that's pre-given.
Okay, so here's what we want you to do. We want you to find patterns in the numbers. For example, A's are all higher than another one, or they increase, or any kind of pattern you can find in the numbers based on the groups. This is really difficult, and it doesn't make much sense. So you have to kind of just look and let your brain be confused for a while. But what you're trying to find is patterns in the numbers. Once you find a pattern in the number, we're going to tell Avery what it is, and then Avery's going to translate that into what it might be. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
AJ?
I think I guess it's C 0% and not like head.
Okay, so
Oh,
let's go ahead and make a list on the board of just observations.
there's nothing in there, right?
This is fine.
Can you label it observations? You see one?
What's the?
That's just reading.
Well, yeah,
Expressing.
I see one.
What do you think?
Well, I don't know. So the first fish A, one for like the head and the body. The head is smaller than the body in number, but for fish B, it's the opposite. So the head has a larger number than the body.
Is there a trend you see in most fish, both head and body?
Not in the 1%.
It's usually,
Okay, why don't you guys take about 3 minutes and talk to each other?
Is this A, B, C, D, E, F?
No. So this, guys, cortisol, don't actually worry about that yet.
Don't worry about this first.
Don't worry about that part. Just worry about the top.
What's S, T, D, E, B, and S, T, D, E, R, R?
Deviation and error, don't worry about those either. Just worry about average, mean, and count.